moving on to our next lecture, lecture on cells, organelles, and membranes. We begin here just defining and explaining a little bit about cells, basic unit of human body. As I talked about the other day in our lecture, we all began our life as a single cell. A zygote, that then becomes 2 cells, that becomes 4, and then on and on and on. So cells can be described as the basic unit of us for that reason. A textbook definition is a cell's living structural and functional unit enclosed by a membrane. One of the most prominent and important theories in the field of biology, which this is a kind of subset of that, is the modern cell theory. States that all organisms are composed of cells and cell products. So if you are trying to decide if something's a living being or not, you have to check to see if it's made up of at least one, but in many cases, many cells. In our case, we're made up of trillions. So we are a living thing. Cells are the simplest structural function of life. We've already said that. When it comes to us, basic unit of us, so it's the simplest, but also basic unit of our body. Number 3 is really the one I kind of hit on the most. An organism's structure and function are due to the activity of its cells. In other words, life processes occur within cells. So what that means is our ability to do anything is a direct result of the activity of our cells. Contracting our muscles requires contracting muscle cells. Digesting food requires digestive cells producing chemicals and doing different things. Our heart pumps because of the activities of cells within our heart. Our brain is a very complicated organ because of the neurons that make it up. So cells are super, super important. That's what does everything in our body. Cells come only from pre-existing cells. That means they don't just kind of appear out of nowhere. Cells of all species have fundamental similarities, something we don't talk about in this class, just kind of comparing us to other organisms, but you can compare ourselves to a plant cell, to a bacterial cell, and there's a lot of similarities to them. One of those similarities is that cells have distinctive shapes, they've got distinctive sizes, and this is a concept that's important to us, not only with cells, but just the entire semester, that structure affects function. So the cells that have these distinctive shapes and sizes have distinctive functions, which explains why a muscle cell has its shape when a neuron has a completely different shape. Regardless, if you're looking at a muscle cell or a neuron, as I've said, all of our human cells are microscopic in size. So they're very small. Diameters range from 7.5 micrometers to about 150. So they're itty bitty, which you may or may not have been exposed to micrometers before. This table here to help kind of give you an understanding of just how small we're talking about. In America, we typically use inches and feet and yards to measure things. What is typically used in science is the metric system, which involves meters and centimeters and all the way down to nanometers, as you can see here on this page, this table. To kind of help keep your head straight, I included this table just to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about. Imagine most people have been exposed to centimeters and millimeters before. Most rulers include a side that you can use centimeters and millimeters to measure something. It's on the opposite side of the inches that we would typically use here in America. Centimeters, there are 2.54 of those, if I remember right off the top of my head, and an inch. So a little over 2.5 of those in an inch. There's 100 of those in 1 meter. So that's why they're said to have, they are 1/100th of a meter. These are objects obviously very visible to the eye. 10 millimeters in a single centimeter, so they're 1/10. Very large cells and groups of cells. But what we talk more about in this lecture are microns and nanometers. Micrometer or microns have this kind of fancy abbreviation symbol. Looks like a U, but has a little extra tail at the beginning. There's 1,000 of these guys in 1 millimeter. So we're talking super, super numerous, but super, super small. And this is where most of your cells are size-wise, your larger organelles. And then when we get into talking about like the cytoskeleton, we'll talk about nanometers, which are tiny, 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 tiny. There's 1,000 of those in 1 micrometer. So small organelles, large biomolecules, talking very, very tiny stuff. Down here at the bottom is a picture illustrating a textbook version of a typical cell that's been sectioned open, so we can kind of see inside. Basically, top's been popped off of it, so we can see all the diversity in the organelles, how complicated our cells really are, even though they're small, and as it says, the basic unit of biology or human body. Basic implies that they're simple, and they're really not. What we'll do in this lecture is kind of go organelle by organelle, looking at their distinctive structures, looking at their distinctive functions. At the very beginning, before we get into that, we're going to work from the outside in, beginning with the plasma membrane and looking at its makeup. Okay, guys, that should wrap us up on this lecture, or this video, I should say. The next video you'll find in the line will be picking up right there with the plasma membrane, where I started to actually record in class like I was supposed to. Thanks.